Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you provide and we really explore them to get to the heart of the matter. We want to leave you informed, but also, some real food for thought. So today, we're digging into a really fascinating personal story someone shared with us. It's a narrative that the author themselves feels is, well, a sequence of divinely guided coincidences.
Exactly. And what we have are excerpts from Ali Majub specifically, First Three Abrahamic Religions.wave, and honor.pdf document.
Right.
And what's key here, I think, is that these are very personal accounts, reflections. They're not, abstract theories.
Not at all.
So our aim really is to try and understand the patterns, the meanings, maybe see what these events, which seem connected, might suggest. Both for the author, obviously, but maybe also for you listening.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The story really kicks off with the author working as a mechanic's apprentice.
Yeah.
Now, that's our starting point.
Yeah.
And it's interesting just to hold on to that image because, well, the journey takes quite a turn.
A big turn.
We then see this person moving into a job at a prestigious hotel. That's quite a leap, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
What strikes you about that initial contrast?
Well, right away, it's the sheer unexpectedness of it all. It really makes you wonder about the paths life can take, sometimes in directions you just wouldn't predict at all.
Yeah.
It sort of highlights how experiences that seem totally different might somehow connect down the line.
And the whole thing hinges on, a chance encounter. The author specifically points to this one meeting as the thing that actually secured the job at this high-end hotel.
Just like that.
Just like that. It really begs the question, doesn't it? How often do these small, seemingly random moments, these interactions, actually end up reshaping our entire lives?
It does make you think about serendipity, about luck. Was it purely being in the right place, right time? Or, maybe there are other factors. Perhaps something about the author's character, their skills that came across in that brief meeting. We don't know for sure.
And the story doesn't stop there with the surprises. After getting the hotel job, things keep happening internally. The author meets someone else with the exact same name.
Right.
And then there are some management shifts within the hotel structure. How do these pieces then fit together?
Okay, yeah, this is where it gets particularly interesting, I think. Because these internal changes, the namesake, the management shuffle, they seem to create an opening.
An opportunity.
Exactly. A set of circumstances that just wouldn't have existed otherwise. It's almost like one unexpected event sort of paves the way for the next one.
Precisely, because this specific combination, meeting the namesake, the changes in management somehow leads to this opportunity for the author. They get sent on a management training course in Brussels.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a long way from a mechanic's garage, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the narrative really stresses this point. This opportunity, it went against the hotel's normal policies. It wasn't the standard way things were done, not the usual promotion track or training route, which just makes it even more remarkable, What does that tell us about how sometimes exceptions happen or these unforeseen chances pop up from really unique situations?
Exactly. It really just highlights how improbable this whole sequence feels. Almost like dominoes falling, but unexpectedly. And this, naturally, leads us to how the author themselves interprets all of this.
That's the core of it, really. The author sees this entire journey, this whole string of seemingly coincidental moments as being orchestrated by God.
Yeah.
This belief, this conviction of divine orchestration, it's central. It's a recurring theme throughout the story you shared with us.
It does make you wonder about that human tendency, doesn't it? To look for meaning in events. We often search for connections, for explanations, especially when things feel, significant or just out of the ordinary. The author clearly sees a guiding hand here.
Yes, and they frame their experience as a testimony. It's a personal account of a life path they genuinely believe was divinely laid out.
A testimony.
It really taps into that deep human desire, I think, to understand our lives within some kind of larger framework, whether you call it fate or destiny or a higher power.
And I'm curious, for you listening right now, does any of this resonate? Have you ever looked back at a series of unexpected events in your own life and just wondered, was there something more going on than just pure chance?
It's also really important to remember, though, that different people could look at the exact same sequence of events and interpret them in completely different ways.
Oh, absolutely.
Based on their own beliefs, their life experiences. And that's part of what makes these personal stories so compelling, isn't it? The diverse meanings we can draw from them.
Now, what's really interesting, as you touched on with the sources, is that this Brussels story isn't like an isolated thing for the author. When we look at the honor.pdf document, we find other experiences where dreams and this feeling of divine guidance seem to play a really big role.
Absolutely. That document, honor.pdf, it gives us more examples that kind of reinforce this pattern, this perception the author has of a guiding hand in their life.
Like what?
Well, for instance, there's the Moscow dream. This was back in 1990. The author dreamt about Reverend Moon visiting Moscow for a world media conference. And then, incredibly, 7 years later, it actually happened.
Wow, 7 years later.
7 years. And it wasn't just that the event happened, was it? The author and their wife were specifically picked to be part of the world media staff there in Moscow.
Right.
And considering how many people were involved, the author themselves explicitly asks, was this just a coincidence? Clearly suggesting they believe it was something more profound, something orchestrated.
What kind of impact would an experience like that have on someone's worldview, do you think?
Oh, I mean, something like that could be deeply impactful. It could really strengthen existing beliefs, couldn't it? And probably shape how you interpret future unexpected events, too.
Yeah.
It kind of cements that idea of a connection between your personal life and something, well, seemingly preordained.
And during that conference in Moscow, the author actually had quite a significant role at the hotel. They were acting as a liaison, managing hospitality, transport for all these international figures, diplomats, journalists, even former heads of state. There were events at the Bolshoi Theater.
Mm-hmm.
It almost feels like that first hotel job, the one that came out of the blue, was maybe a stepping stone, preparing them for these later, more prominent roles.
That's a really compelling connection to draw. It suggests a kind of unfolding, doesn't it? Where earlier experiences, even if they seem totally random at the time, actually build towards later opportunities.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if we always recognize the significance of things as they're actually happening.
And even before that Moscow dream, there was another one mentioned, the flood dream.
Ah, yes, the flood dream.
The author saw this huge flood and interpreted it very personally as a calling, like they were being selected by a higher power for some new plan. This really emphasizes a consistent feeling, a sense of being chosen for something specific.
It does. It highlights this powerful sense of personal agency, but it's intertwined with a belief in divine will.
Right.
So the author isn't just passively letting life happen. They're actively interpreting everything through this spiritual lens and seeing themselves as playing a part in some larger design.
And it extends even to things that might seem purely about family. There's that anecdote about unknown relatives suddenly visiting, which then leads to a marriage proposal for the author's sister. And even that is interpreted as God preparing the next level of his plan. It's a very specific way of understanding, well, family events.
It really shows how deeply embedded this way of interpreting things is for the author. It stretches into personal, family matters. It suggests a worldview where essentially nothing is truly random.
We also learn, going way back, about childhood dreams the author had. Dreams of going abroad and being successful.
Right, which contrasts sharply with their initial reality, working on a farm.
Exactly. So those later international experiences, like Moscow, like Brussels, and they almost feel like a fulfillment of this long-held dream, maybe realized in ways they never could have predicted back then.
Yeah, that adds another interesting layer, doesn't it? It shows how sometimes our own desires, our ambitions can kind of align with these unexpected opportunities. And that can lead to this deep sense of fulfillment, or even, well, destiny.
So when we try to put it all together, from the mechanic's apprenticeship to the hotel to Brussels, and then layering in these other experiences, these dreams, this perceived divine guidance, the core of this whole narrative really seems to rest on the author's personal belief system and the specific meaning they find in all these events.
Exactly. It's a powerful illustration of how our beliefs, our convictions, can genuinely shape our perception and how we interpret our own life stories. What looks like just a string of coincidences to one person
Can be seen as a deliberate, divinely guided plan by another.
Precisely.
So what might be a key takeaway here for you, our listener, tuning in? This deep dive into the author's journey, it really invites us, I think, to reflect on that interplay between chance, our own actions, our own agency, and the role that belief plays in shaping the paths our lives end up taking.
Yeah, there's a real opportunity here, maybe, to think about those unexpected turns in your own life.
Yeah.
Have there been moments that felt particularly significant? or improbable.
Mm-hmm.
How did you make sense of them at the time? And maybe how might you interpret them now, having heard this story?
And ultimately, by examining this very personal narrative, we get a kind of shortcut, really, into understanding one unique perspective. How one individual has found meaning, found purpose, in what could otherwise seem like just a series of random events.
So just to summarize then, we've explored this pretty remarkable journey, right?
Yeah.
From mechanic apprentice all the way to management training in Brussels, a sequence the author firmly believes was orchestrated by God. We've also looked at other examples from their life dreams, perceived guidance that reinforce this, highlighting these core themes of coincidence, maybe destiny, and definitely the power of individual interpretation.
And that brings us to our final thought for you today. When you look back at the unexpected detours, maybe the surprising opportunities in your own life's journey, what story do you tell yourself about them? Do you see a random walk, the result of your own hard work, a series of happy accidents, or perhaps something more? We encourage you to consider your own narrative, perhaps in light of the author's compelling experience we've discussed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
And if you have other sources you think we should explore, please do send them our way.